The courtroom fell silent as I pulled out the leather-bound journal. My father's new wife, Victoria, sat smugly beside her expensive lawyer, probably thinking about how she'd spend my trust fund money. At 25, she was barely older than me, and her designer outfit probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She'd been so confident walking in here today, but that was about to change. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "before you make your decision, there's something you need to see." Victoria's smirk wavered slightly as I opened the journal to a marked page. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat, and I could almost see the moment he realized what I was holding. "I'm Alexandra Bennett, 23 years old, and this is the story of how my father's young wife tried to steal my $4.5 million trust fund, and how my late mother's foresight stopped her in her tracks. It all started 2 years ago, when my father announced he was marrying Victoria, a woman he'd met at his country club just 3 months earlier. I was still grieving my mother's death from cancer the previous year, and suddenly this woman young enough to be my sister was moving into our family home, redecorating the rooms my mother had lovingly designed, and trying to play mommy. "Alexandra, darling," she'd say in her fake sweet voice, "you really should update your wardrobe. Those old things of your mother's are so dated." Or she'd rearrange Mom's carefully curated book collection, claiming the space needed a more modern aesthetic. I tolerated it all for Dad's sake. He seemed happy, or at least distracted from his grief, and I wanted to believe Victoria might actually care for him. But then came the day I overheard her on the phone with someone, probably one of her friends. "Don't worry, it's all going according to plan," she was saying, her voice low and intense. "The old man is completely wrapped around my finger, and once we're married, accessing that trust fund will be a piece of cake. His daughter won't know what hit her." I should have confronted her right then, but something held me back. Maybe it was the years of my mother's gentle guidance, teaching me to think strategically rather than react emotionally. "Patience is power," Mom used to say, and those words had never felt more relevant. My mother, Elizabeth Bennett, had been a brilliant corporate lawyer before she got sick. She'd handled some of the biggest trust fund cases in the state, and she'd seen firsthand how family money could bring out the worst in people. When she set up my trust fund using her inheritance and life insurance money, she'd done so with incredible attention to detail. "Alexandra," she told me during one of our last conversations, "I'm putting some safeguards in place. Your father is a wonderful man, but he can be naive when it comes to matters of the heart. Promise me you'll keep this journal safe and only use it if absolutely necessary." The journal she gave me contained not only her detailed notes about the trust fund structure, but also evidence of conversations she'd had with Dad about potential future scenarios. She'd even recorded video statements from both of them, discussing their intentions for the money and agreeing on protective measures. At the time, I thought she was being overly cautious. Now, watching Victoria's calculated attempts to get her hands on my inheritance, I understood my mother's wisdom. Victoria's plan began to unfold slowly, but systematically. First came the subtle comments about how family money should be shared, especially with new family members. Then she started suggesting that, as my new mother, she should have some say in how the trust fund was managed. Dad, still somewhat lost in grief and flattered by the attention of a beautiful young woman, began to waver. He'd always been better with emotions than finances. That had been Mom's department. Victoria played on this, gradually convincing him that consolidating family assets under her management would be more efficient. "Darling," she said to him one evening over dinner, while I silently pushed food around my plate, "it just makes sense to have everything under one umbrella. Alexandra is barely out of college. She can't possibly understand how to manage such a large sum of money." I wanted to point out that I had a degree in finance and was already working at a prestigious investment firm, but Mom's voice in my head counseled patience. Victoria was revealing her hand piece by piece, and I needed to let her strategy fully emerge. The breaking point came 6 months into their marriage. Victoria arranged a family meeting with her financial advisor, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit who kept referring to my trust fund as our assets. "I've drawn up some papers," Victoria announced, sliding documents across the table. We'll need Alexandra to sign these to transfer control of the trust to our joint family account. Dad looked uncertain. I thought we were just discussing options today. James, darling, Victoria purred, placing her hand over his. We talked about this. It's for the best. Alexandra is too young to handle this responsibility. That's when she turned to me with that condescending smile I'd grown to hate. I'm your new mommy now, so your trust fund is mine to manage. Sign the papers, sweetie. I picked up the documents, pretending to read them carefully while my mind raced. This was the moment to make a stand. But Mom's voice again whispered patience. Let them show their full hand first. I'll need to have my lawyer review these, I said carefully. Victoria's smile tightened. That won't be necessary. James, tell her this is a family matter. Instead of immediately replying, I stood up and walked to the cabinet where I kept Mom's journal. Victoria hadn't even known what it was. She'd tried to throw it out once during one of her redecorating sprees, calling it old clutter. Actually, I said, returning to the table, I think we should all review Mom's notes on the trust fund structure first. The color drained from Victoria's face as I opened the journal to reveal my mother's meticulous documentation. But I wasn't done. I pulled out my phone and played a video, one of the last Mom had recorded. If you're watching this, Mom's voice filled the room. Someone is trying to access Alexandra's trust fund without proper authorization. James, honey, remember our discussions about this. The trust is structured with specific protections that cannot be overridden, even by you. This was our agreement, and it's all documented here. Dad's face crumpled as he watched the screen, remembering conversations he'd had with Mom but had somehow forgotten in his grief-fueled romance with Victoria. His new wife, meanwhile, was frantically whispering to her financial advisor. This changes nothing, Victoria declared once the video ended. James is Alexandra's father and my husband. He has the right to dash. Actually, I interrupted, he doesn't. And neither do you. Mom made sure of that. What followed was 2 months of legal battles as Victoria tried every trick in the book to get her hands on my trust fund. She hired expensive lawyers, tried to claim Dad wasn't of sound mind when he agreed to Mom's trust structure, and even attempted to argue that as my new mother, she had rights to the money. Finally, it all came down to today's court hearing. Victoria had somehow convinced Dad to support her petition for control of the trust, though I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. She probably thought she had it in the bag until I revealed the final piece of evidence. The judge adjusted her glasses as she read through Mom's journal, paying particular attention to the pages detailing Dad's explicit agreement to the trust's protective structure. Then she watched the video depositions, including one where Dad specifically acknowledged that no future spouse should have access to the trust. Mrs. Bennet, the judge said, addressing Victoria, this trust was clearly established with specific protections that cannot be overridden. Furthermore, she continued, looking at some additional papers I'd submitted, evidence suggests you entered this marriage with the specific intent to gain control of these assets through manipulation and possible fraud. Victoria's smug expression finally cracked. That's ridiculous. I love James. This ungrateful child is just trying to come between us. Is that why you told your friend the old man was wrapped around your finger? I asked quietly, playing a recording I'd made of her phone conversation months ago. Mom had taught me well, document everything. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Victoria's lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear. Dad's face had gone from uncertain to thunderous, and Victoria showed her true colors. You little bitch, she shrieked, lunging across the courtroom at me. The bailiff had to restrain her as she continued screaming about how she deserved the money, how she'd wasted 2 years playing nice for nothing. The judge's gavel came down hard. Order. Mrs. Bennet, control yourself or you'll be held in contempt. Now, given the evidence presented, not only am I denying your petition for control of the trust, but I'm also recommending a full investigation into possible charges of attempted fraud and conspiracy. Victoria collapsed into her chair, her designer outfit suddenly looking like an expensive costume. Dad wouldn't meet anyone's eyes, the reality of his wife's true nature finally sinking in. As we left the courthouse, Dad tried to speak to me. Alexandra, I'm so sorry. I should have. Not now, Dad, I said quietly. We can talk later. I needed time to process everything, to decide if I could forgive him for almost helping Victoria steal the legacy Mom had worked so hard to protect. That evening, sitting in my apartment with Mom's journal open on my lap, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for her foresight. She'd known something like this might happen and had prepared me not just with legal protections, but with the wisdom to handle it strategically. The aftermath was both easier and harder than I expected. Victoria, facing potential fraud charges and realizing she wouldn't get her hands on my trust fund, filed for divorce within weeks. She tried to claim spousal support, but given the evidence of her fraudulent intentions, she left with nothing but the designer clothes on her back. Dad fell into a deep depression, finally confronting both his grief over Mom's death and his own vulnerability to manipulation. It took months of therapy and careful reconstruction of our relationship before we could really talk about what had happened. Your mother, he said during one of our first real conversations after everything, she always could see right through people. I should have listened to her warnings about moving too fast after her death. I showed him Mom's journal again, this time sharing some of the loving messages she'd written to both of us. She knew you'd be vulnerable, Dad. She didn't blame you. She just wanted to protect us both. Today, 2 years later, the trust fund remains safely under the protective structure Mom created. I've used some of it to establish a foundation in her name, providing legal education and support to protect other families from predatory relationships. Dad has slowly begun dating again, this time with a grief counselor's guidance and a much better prenuptial agreement template. He's also taken a more active interest in understanding the financial protections Mom put in place, finally appreciating the depth of her love and foresight. Victoria occasionally makes headlines in the local society pages, usually attached to some wealthy older man's arm. But thanks to Mom's wisdom, she's become a cautionary tale in our circles rather than a successful gold digger. As for me, I keep Mom's journal in a special place in my office. Sometimes, when facing difficult decisions, I open it and read her notes. Her voice comes through so clearly in those pages, practical, loving, and always protecting her family even after she's gone. The trust fund she protected isn't just about money. It's about a mother's love, wisdom, and determination to take care of her child even when she knew she couldn't be there herself. Every time I look at that leather-bound journal, I'm reminded that true wealth isn't just about dollars in an account. It's about the legacy of love and wisdom we leave behind. The look on Victoria's face when she realized she'd been outmaneuvered by a dead woman's foresight? That was priceless. But the real victory wasn't in defeating her scheme. It was in honoring my mother's legacy by being as smart and strategic as she'd taught me to be. Patience is power, Mom always said. She was right about that, just as she was right about so many other things. Her wisdom continues to guide me, and her protections continue to ensure that her legacy remains intact, serving its intended purpose rather than funding the lifestyle of someone like Victoria. In the end, perhaps the greatest lesson wasn't about protecting wealth at all. It was about understanding that the most valuable inheritance a parent can leave isn't money, but wisdom, love, and the tools to protect oneself in a world where not everyone has your best interests at heart. Thanks for watching. See you again in the next video. Stay stunned.